Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dev to Dev, the podcast about everyday video game developers and why they do what they do every day. I'm Alex Solomon once again back here, still trying to figure out the hosting gig. This is a few episodes in, but I'm still figuring it out. So please give me some grace if I make a few bumbles. But this time, I'm excited for another conversation with another friend and ex-colleague, Lehman. Please introduce yourself.
Hey, yeah, I'm Leeman Tuttle. I am the former Loremaster for ZeniMax Online Studios' big multiplayer video game. And prior to that, I was the Loremaster for the Elder Scrolls Online.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Lehman. Thank you for your time. Thanks for coming on the podcast. I'm excited to dig into this. You've got a very interesting role, and it's been an interesting time working together, even though, we're not anymore. But I'm excited to learn your history. So I always like to start this conversation with my favourite first question. What first got you inspired about video games?
Oh my God! I'm in my 40s. I'm an old timer. So I remember I got my folks got me the Nintendo, the NES Classic, and it came with the Golden Zelda cartridge. And that was my gateway, and I just loved it from the start. My old classic NES, and that's where I got my start. And then as the medium evolved, just got more and more excited about it as things went along, and that's how we got here.
Love it. Right. So original NES, the classic Zelda cartridge. And what was it about that really caught your imagination and your attention?
It's tough to It's tough to say. I always had a big imagination as a kid. I always did a lot of playing pretend or whatever, and I think that video games allowed you to pretend. It's kind of like assisted pretending at that age. You can run around in the yard with a stick and pretend it's a sword or whatever, but video games, at least for me at that age, it was a cool opportunity to sort of, pretend under the bright lights and be like, okay, I really am like a little guy running around fighting goblins and ogres and all sorts of stuff. And so that just really appealed to me. Also, I was an artist, once a long time ago. And I remember the old NES cartridges. They came with that like really tight like 2D art, like the Mega Mans and the Zeldas, and it like had this really sweet artwork. And so that really made it. Even though like the graphics were very very rudimentary, then again you could imagine you like see the pictures of Link and Zelda, and you're like, oh okay, so this is what they're going for. But yeah, I think it's just it was a combination of just being an imaginative kid and looking for opportunities to kind of flex that imagination in a more structured way.
Okay, yeah. So the NES, inspired by the NES and the artwork, etc. Where did this happen? Where did you grow up? What kind of area were you growing up in?
Yeah, I grew up in it's a place called Laurel, Maryland. It's a small, at the time it was kind of like a small blue collar city in outside of DC, and it was in a little townhouse development. I enjoyed that part of my life. it was fun. My dad was a postal worker. My mom worked in an office, and I have 3 siblings, so things were a little tight here and there, but I enjoyed it. Had a pretty happy upbringing at that time.
That's cool. And so 3 siblings, were they also gamers? Were they kind of following your video game passion, or?
No, my all of them are older because they're all from a previous marriage on my mother's side. So the closest to me was 9 years ahead. And the other 2, I mean, my brother eventually sort of got into games, but at the time, that generational disconnect, like they had played like their buddies Atari once or twice or whatever, but it was not like they weren't at the ground floor of like video games as we sort of understand them now. So I remember my brother, he used to joke about, I'd say, hey, do you want to play a video game? And he's like, is it one of those run and jump games? And I'm like, what does that even mean? He's like, the one where you're on there and you got to jump to a platform. He's like, I can't deal with that. And I was like, yeah. So like platformers were not his bag. But my sister, the one she did get into, she was really into Legend of Zelda. She would play that a lot. But now none of them really play much anything. My brother, again, every so often he'll play a little something, but video games is very much the purview of me and mine.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So you were kind of the primary gamer in the house, I guess, and other than some dabbling from family.
Yeah.
Interesting. So what about friends? Kind of in that area, was there a lot of gaming culture around you? Was it just you? Like, how did that? Maybe when you went to school, did that start change? How did that go?
Yeah, so we moved around a little bit, and then the house that my parents still own, that's where I met like my lifelong friends. It was in a different part of Laurel, and we were that community was very deep into video games. Like that was kind of one of the cornerstones. We used to run around and do stuff outside and stuff a lot too, but like when we think about what the stuff that we did when we were kids, it was a lot of GoldenEye. It was a lot of like Wayne Gretzky hockey and Killer Instinct, and like there's mostly GoldenEye though. We spent we did a lot of GoldenEye, and I think that yeah, we all of us were really pretty hardcore gamers in that way, and it was great because that was when. I mean, I think it's one of the great tragedies of video games generally. We're coming back from it a little bit, but at the time, you were playing games, but you're all together. We were all sitting on the floor in my friend's basement playing, GoldenEye together. And when couch co-op sort of fell away and people were sort of playing from their house, I don't know. I feel like some of that magic kind of fell off. And I know that there's a lot of games that have been really stepping up in that regard and like trying to pull couch co-op back into the fore, which I'm a huge fan of anytime that I get to see somebody do something like that. So but at the time, played a ton of GoldenEye, and those guys, I mean, some of them are still I've got 3 of my buddies, we still play games Friday nights. Like they're really into Helldivers, and we played a lot of Company Heroes before that, and so we still connect on video games, but obviously it's different because we're in different places and we're all older guys and stuff. So, but it's cool. I mean, that video game connective tissue is still there. It still keeps that group together, which is nice. That's one of those things. It's like I really do think that video games, they can be in my darkest nights, sometimes I'm like, is what we do important? Like, but like I have to remind myself that like video games are, for a lot of people, especially in our generation, that's the connective tissue that, maintains relationships that otherwise would, just wither and die, because people are moving around, especially devs, we're in different parts of the country all the time and stuff. So yeah, I think that in terms of a tool that keeps people together, that maintains friendships, keeps them healthy, I think video games are a public service in that regard.
That's a great way of putting it. I agree. Yeah, they can be such a great touchstone, right? A connection point for folks, and it sounds like the sort of N64 era was a big part of that for you. How did that, playing those games and then going into school and etc. Like, was there a point where you felt like you could maybe make video games rather than just play them? Was there a transition point there?
Not for a long time, to be honest. Like, I went to my undergrad. I went and I studied history and philosophy, and I did that without really thinking about like what comes next. I mean, I was just sort of following my muse, and I loved reading and I loved learning about history, and so it just sort of made sense. And I kind of like dabbled with the idea, okay, maybe I'll be a professor or whatever, but I didn't really think about like, what am I going to do? What am I going to produce? So I got that degree, and then I kind of was like, messing with my GREs and looking at graduate schools, and then I was like, I don't know, man, like I don't know. So then I started thinking about, okay, what do I like? What do I want to produce, right? And like I said, I had always been an artist. I've been drawing and painting my whole life, and it was one of these things where everyone thought, oh, it's a natural fit, because everyone was always like, oh, Lehman, you should go do art. And I was like, I don't know, it's like that's my real, release. That's how I get out of my own head and like relax. Like, I don't know if I want to do that as a profession. And then people were like, no, man, you're so good. You should just do it. So I was like, oh, okay. So like I ended up going to a scam school, like a for-profit art school out in Phoenix, Arizona. And I was out there and I was studying animation with the intent of like doing like stuff for film. And all my buddies at the school were all game developers, game development students, like 3D modeling and environmental stuff and everything. And I'm watching them do their cool stuff, and then I'm like looking at my stuff, and it's like I don't know. No offense to anybody who does 3D animation, I think it's an amazing skill. It was sort of fun when I was doing it, but a lot of it, it's like, I mean, for someone like me, I'm a reader. It's like I felt like I was like diffusing a bomb. Like there's all these like dots, and you got to move things around. There's all these sliders and numbers, and I was like, oh my god, how is this art? And for some people, it absolutely is. It's amazing. But for me, it was not. So I was working on modeling stuff, and then people were like, all right, man, well, you're hanging out with all the game development people. You should get a game development thing. And I was like, maybe, okay. But by that point, I was sort of already out the door. So I got my degree, and then I'm like sitting around and went back home, and I'm looking for gigs in film, nothing. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'll look for stuff in video games because I know a lot about video games. I enjoy video games. And an opening showed up at ZeniMax that they were looking for quality assurance people. And I was like, okay, I mean, I like video games, maybe I can go there and I can show them my art and I'll parlay that into this concept gig or something like that. So I went in fully intending to do art. Like that was my thing. So I got into the studio. I was making all these connections. I was talking to there's a great concept artist, a guy named Matt Weathers. I'm not sure where he is now, but he was super cool. He's one of the lead concept art guys, and we were working hard and working on portfolio and stuff. And as it went along, people saw I was doing a lot of writing too, like doing reviews of people's work. And Rich Lambert, he was like, "Hey man, like we see that you're doing a really great job with writing this stuff, the reviews for the Quest. How would you feel about doing content?" And I was like, "Well, Rich, look, man, I'm an artist, okay? I don't have time for all this other stuff." And I was like, "I'll take that job. But you need to understand when this concept art boat rolls in, I'm getting on it and sailing away. Like that's it." And he's like, "Yeah, okay, no problem." So that's how I kind of slipped on a banana peel and wound up doing writing and concept stuff and content development. And yeah, it was weird because it was definitely not where I was headed. But I mean, it's circuitous path. That's where we wind up. So
wow. Okay, there's so much to unpick there. So art was your passion. Art of I guess more traditional art rather than 3D art was a passion.
yeah.
And that's the thing that kind of got you thinking, like, that's what, if I was going to make video games, that's what I would do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Down to my bones. I was like, this is what I'm gonna do.
Right. Wow. And then when you went to an actual school where there was real game development, training happening, you found that actually that aspect of the way that manifested in video games of that era was not the version of art that you were kind of looking for.
Right. Yeah. It was much more just much more technical than I was, like I said, I was a traditional media. I did a lot in pencils and paints and pastels, and like it felt very different and very technical, and the results, the things that you could make with it were amazing. And but the process just was never very intuitive for me at all. So the classes that I really enjoyed out there were, like obviously it's like life drawing and color theory and like the kind of stuff that's like not necessarily working in the machine, like, doing all the sliders and dots and all that stuff. But again, I mean, it's like the folks who are good at that stuff. It's amazing to watch, and I was always intensely envious of them when I was like trying to make my little animation. I'm like, here, does that look okay? And then people are like doing these like amazing things. It's like, oh, I guess it's not that good. But yes, that was it.
But I guess what's incredible about that, and I think there's a nuance there that could be easily missed, is you know, art in video games is a very broad umbrella, and I think your story sort of indicates how there's, you know, some very different aspects of what art in video game. You know, there are, to your point, there are concept artists that, you know, it sounds like that was sort of the area where like, oh, that's concept art is much closer to what I want to do. But
Right.
you know, there are many artists that are much more technical, do an entirely different version of art that for video games, especially in the 3D era, that you know, is a whole skill set that you don't necessarily automatically have if you're an artist, right? You know, they're very different prongs of a, you know, of a similar idea.
Totally. And I think that that's something that's one of those things that I always, when I'm talking to people who are trying to break into the industry, that's a thing that I did not understand. And you know, now I do, obviously. And like people, they don't know how broad that kind of horizon is for that discipline. Like it's not just, you know, it's like, hey, I can paint a character. It's like, okay, you can paint a character, but art within the context of a video game, like you said, is this really broad palette of, you know, environments, you know, VFX, character, you know, there's a billion different things that, you know, you can do as an artist in games. And yeah, I think it's one of the great tragedies that like people don't sort of put you on that path early, because, you know, yeah, there's the stuff that's happening in VFX is amazing. And I remember when I was in art school, nobody was talking about VFX, you know, like, but that's, you know,
Yeah.
absolutely like this incredibly important part of, you know, the art pipeline of video games. So, yeah, that's definitely, if we were going to get a message out to potential artists in the industry, it's like, don't just look at characters. There's a lot going on, that you can do that's not that.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, yeah. And I think, and I guess you discovered that not the hard way, right? But you kind of bumped up against that wall, and you were like, "Oh, this wasn't what I was looking for. Like, what do I do?" That's kind of interesting.
Exactly.
And then, like you say, it didn't directly lead to a role in the industry, but I guess going through that process of that, you know, that art school and being so close to people that were sort of training to be game developers, did you absorb a lot of kind of, you know, understanding of the process from that, or, you know, how did that sort of correlate into the actual being in the industry? Were there parallels there?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that really struck me, and it did actually end up being more true, is the idea of what are the conditions, like the restrictions of the medium. Not necessarily, I don't know if restrictions is the right word, but the boundaries within which video game art and development and content take place. And so that came up a lot about, you know, people talking about, oh, you know, there's a poly limit, or there's, you know, there's too many verts here or whatever. And that kind of got the, you know, thing moving in my brain where it's like, oh, okay, so it's not just, you know, if you sit down with, you know, a pencil and a piece of paper, sort of, you know, obviously there are, you know, limits to what you can do with a pencil and a piece of paper, but it really is, it's sort of a sort of a limitless horizon in terms of, you know, you can do whatever you want. But in video games, there are technical restrictions, there are gameplay restrictions, there are, you know, that there's a million different things, that you have to account for when you're developing stuff. And I think for some people that can feel limiting, but I'm a strong believer in sort of like art through restriction or art through adversity, being able to refine an idea down to fit within a medium. And like, honestly, like I think that's just something that I always have to sort of remind myself of, or always, and always, I'm always, I don't know, there's something cool about it, about the idea that, you know, you have this box to work within, and, you know, can you buck up against it? Sure. But it also, it gives a thing its shape, right? Like the art of game development, it works within these principles and these boundaries. And, you know, how can you work within those in a way that's really, really cool and and delivers a really excellent experience that's not a movie, it's not a book, it's a game, it's authentically a game. And I think that did come through. I did get that from my buddies at the school. And then, obviously being in the industry, that really, sharpened that, and I got a better understanding of okay, what exactly does that mean? And yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think it's one that we in the industry get used to it changing, right? Every 5 to 7 years, right?
Right.
Those constraints change in one form or another. Memories go up, and bump mapping appears, or these new things appear, and change those constraints. But the fact that there's constraints is still true. It's just they become different, and we have to kind of adapt and react to that. Which I think that's a great point. It's again a crucial part of what makes game development. I think it's a really good call out.
Yeah.
So you went to an art school, picked up some stuff from some game dev buddies, found this sort of slight clash against what you were hoping to do, and then a role opens up at ZeniMax for QA. So that kind of like, this. I think you said this was kind of your chance to kind of get into the industry, yeah? And like you say, use it as a way of kind of parlaying your way into the thing you really wanted to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that's kind of a cliche at this point. It's like, oh yeah, get into QA and then you work your way in or whatever. But I think it was absolutely just an essential part of my sort of career journey. Now we were luckily our QA department was embedded, right? Like we weren't shuttled off to a different building, like we were face to face with devs all the time. And I just learned so much about how games were made and the kind of, like the rough sort of how the sausage is made kind of stuff about all the things that can go wrong and all the things that need to go right in order for it to work. And just the how pipelines and leadership structures and all that stuff. Like I was able to learn that in an environment that was really friendly and healthy. I loved all my coworkers. We were all kind of goofballs, but we're all kind of learning how everything works. And then I feel like when a job did come along, when that content gig was available, I was much. I mean, obviously the personal connections were a huge part of it, but I was also just in terms of industry knowledge of how games are made, I was just so much better equipped to answer those questions and kind of hit the ground running. So, I think QA, obviously it's an essential discipline just generally. I think all of us know, they get shafted sometimes, but it's such an important part of the development process. And I strongly recommend anybody who, even if, you don't have to necessarily be someone who wants to be, creating, assets or doing gameplay stuff. Just if you're interested in how video games work, being in QA is a great place to be. You'll learn a ton.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, same for me. That's where I started, and yeah, you get so much of an understanding of the process and how games work, and it gives you a really good opportunity to learn through osmosis, I think.
Yeah.
So QA gives you that good insight. You get a step, you get your foot in the door at a company. But you mentioned that writing, you were doing the reviews of the quests, and it sounds like writing was also a passion of yours as well as the art. That's always been the case?
Yeah, but it was funny. It was like one of these like hidden passions that I just never really was serious about or something. Like it was one of these like weird sort of like usual suspects moments when I finally got into writing like professionally, because I like started looking back and I was like, oh man, I did do a lot of writing and I did really enjoy it and it was really good. And like, so it was hilarious. I remember I was kind of a delinquent for a while, and when it was one of these, I don't know, like Goodwill Hunting sort of things. Like I was in this English class with this guy, Mr. McDermott. I'll never forget him. He's a really, really cool guy, and he gave us this really open-ended creative writing assignment, and it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. And it wasn't like, hey, here's a book report, here's whatever. He's like, just go nuts, man. Write 15-page goofy story. And I ended up writing this really terrible like spy thriller like story or whatever. And I had a blast. It was really, I really enjoyed it. And I gave it to him and he's like, oh my God, this is like really good. We need to get you into more advanced classes. And I was like, do I have to do more work in those classes? Because if so, I'm not interested. And then like, it was hilarious. There's this whole like horse trading thing where I was like talking to the teachers, and I was like, how much work is it? Like, and they eventually convinced me that it wasn't too much work. And it was great because I moved into, they were more advanced writing classes and stuff, and then I was able to. So I really, really enjoyed that stuff, and I enjoyed writing my philosophy papers when I was in college. I did a ton of reading and writing, and so when I finally got into writing, I was like, oh my God, like this, it was with me all along, like it was there, and I just wasn't paying attention. So yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. Right. And so, yeah, that role kind of unlocked that passion. So do you think there's any correlation between, that passion for writing and the video games you played, or was that kind of a personal, a personal discovery in terms of your, as you're working your way through your education and writing a lot?
No, I mean, I think that video games were absolutely keyed into that kind of like secret passion about writing from the beginning. Like, I was a huge BioWare narrative game fan, Baldur's Gate. I mean, there's any game that I found that had a compelling narrative. I remember, I think I was playing Metal Gear Solid, and there was all the Kojima like long kind of monologues and stuff, and I'd never seen something like that in a game, and I was like, wow, like that's nuts, like look how much story they're piling into this walk around and choke people and hide in a box game, and that was that. I think that kind of opened my eyes to what interactive narrative is capable of. And I loved KOTOR, Jade Empire. There was just a ton of opportunities there. And so yeah, I think that went hand in hand. I think I've always been like, I love movies, I love books, but I feel like video games have always been the kind of like the top of my media consumption, and the idea that real story could take place in that medium, especially for when we started with Mario Brothers and Zelda, where I mean, yes, there's a narrative, but it is bare bones and it's not overt. Watching that kind of progression of like video games evolve into a complex storytelling medium. Yeah, I think that definitely had an effect on me long term.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And it might be a bit of a reach, but it's funny that the game that you said you were inspired by, Zelda, is an RPG, right? Which, to your point, was light on the narrative, but probably more dense than most games of that time. Totally. And you mentioned the box art as being kind of, the inspiration. Like, it's funny that that might be a bit of a reach, but it feels like
I think
a parallel there between.
Yeah, I agree. I think so.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, yeah. So big RPG fan, that inspires you to write. Big art, traditional artist. You're inspired to continue that skill. So when you got into the actual kind of proper writing, I'd love to sort of dig into the Loremaster role a little bit. I love that title. It's such an incredibly inspiring title to have. So you started writing for ESO, and I guess the Scrolls Online. How did that go? How did you find that? It sounds like it unlocked your writing passion, but what was that process like?
Yeah. So when I transferred from QA into content, it was the first gig was very much it was content development. Like there was writing involved, but it was a very tools based sort of technical role. And that's again, I mean, this is kind of a continuing theme. Like Lehman wants to do something creative, and then he goes to a place and he's excited about it, and then there's a bunch of numbers, like that was very much my experience. Like I actually have I didn't discover this until very later, but I have a disorder where I see numbers mixed up. And I just didn't know that for a very long time, and I was really, really bad at math, and I never really understood why. And when I was in college, I was doing something, and I was hanging out with my now wife, my then girlfriend, and I was doing some addition, and I was tapping the paper in patterns, And she was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, this is how I do my math. I tap in patterns." And she's like, "What? No one does that." And then I came to find out that that was a coping mechanism for people with, dyscalculia or whatever, the inability to see numbers correctly. So it was funny. So I carry that with me into this job. There's lots of numbers, and the only way I was able to kind of overcome it is that I patterns on the number keys. So like I'm able to sort of, and I'd still screw up all the time, but so I'm butting up against that all the time because of the number thing. And then also just the way that the tools, scripting works. Visual scripting was easier for me than actual like the really hardcore stuff, but there was a lot of that in there. So loved the storytelling part of it, loved the character part of it, did not love the development, like the all the scripting side of things at all. But I mean, on the whole, it was, I still enjoyed it. It's just I was really struggling with that part. And then we had a writing team, it was run by Wynn McLaughlin at the time. And I was looking at those guys and I was like, what are you doing? And they're like, well, we just kind of write stuff. And I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. I would love to just write stuff. How do I do that? And so I talked to Wynn and other writers a lot, Zach Bush, Michael Zenke, a bunch of other guys, and I was just trying to kind of absorb everything there. Bill Slavicsek, obviously, he's the lead writer now, or narrative director, I think. But try to just absorb as much as I could about how that works, what the points of connectivity between the writers and the content developers was. And eventually I just kind of elbowed my way into that team. And so then I was writer, and that was great. And then kind of just kept chugging along. Got to be a senior writer, and I got to be sort of the principal on two big releases, the Murkmire release and Clockwork City. And as I was going along, I'd always been a big Elder Scrolls fan. So as I was going along, I also realized that it's like, okay, so you can write these stories, but the stories contribute to, story big S of, Elder Scrolls and kind of helping shape that universe, which I always thought was really, really cool. So, and then that's kind of what set me on the path to doing the Loremaster gig.
Got it. Okay. So interesting. So yeah. So the content side of it was not. You thought was what it was going to be. It was going to be one thing and was something different, and then you found your way to the writing side. How did that passion for Elder Scrolls that you already had? How did that manifest in the writing? Did you just sort of connect with the lore right away and sort of feel like you were comfortable? Did it take some adaptation? Like how did that go?
No, I was pretty familiar with the lore prior to the job. I loved Morrowind. I loved Oblivion. Later on, loved Skyrim. I thought that that universe provided a lot of opportunities to do fun things that you wouldn't see in another fantasy franchise. And when we were doing the quests, I mean, it's I think that this sort of picked the lock on some stuff for me generally, like for how I do my job now. There's the idea that yes, you're telling a story with characters, but there's all these kind of hidden hooks in that where you can find kind of meta narratives within those smaller narratives. And you can, yes, you have an Argonian in a quest, and the Argonian is just like a normal person. They have their own, kind of like interests and stuff. And obviously developing a character is, kind of character by themselves is important. But when you bring all the nuance of what makes an Argonian, what makes an Argonian within that cultural context that they're in right there, different, then I think it opens up all these layers of complexity that if you don't know the lore, if you're not familiar with it, you just miss out. You miss out on those opportunities to make things more complex. And more complexity is not always good. I mean, it's good simple stories are good too. So a lot of it you kind of tuck away, you hide it for the people who are really interested in that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, I think a familiarity with, or not even a familiarity, but just an interest in what that universe does well, I think is important. in order to deliver an authentic experience that you could only find in that place, you know?
Yeah, agreed. And so is that where the kind of Loremaster, the sort of, you know, becoming that vessel of understanding the lore, you know, developed on Elder Scrolls Online, and you know that you ultimately took, you know, to the next project?
Yeah, I think so to an extent. I mean, one of the things I always tell people, and I don't know if this has been your experience, but like a lot of my life, certainly my professional life, is it's just you slip on a banana peel and then you're just doing something, right? Like it's not like you didn't plan it. You didn't. I mean, I'm not a planner anyway, and it's so funny because I talk to people and like, how did you plan to move forward, or what was your goals when you did this? And I was like, dude, man, I don't know. You know, my goals were to go to work and to have a good time doing what I was doing. And so the Loremaster gig, I was, you know, senior writer. I was doing, like I said, I did Merc Meyer, I did clockwork, I did some dungeon work. And then Lawrence Schick, who was the lore master, got a gig at Larian, and he rolled out, and they were like, okay, well, we need a lore master. Lehman, you know a lot about this. You want to do it? And I was like, okay, like, that sounds cool. Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a good gig. So that's how it happened. There was no angling. I didn't, you know, I did watch Lawrence. I did sort of subconsciously take notes on what he was doing. And I had a connection with him where, you know, like I said, I mean, it doesn't have to be encyclopedic knowledge, but just an interest, right? So if I'm writing a story about a dark elf doing X, I would be like, Lawrence, what do you think? And he would give me an answer. And I always found those answers helpful. And so I was like, okay, well, if I'm in a place where I can provide helpful answers, or even just a sounding board for people who are trying to, you know, make the world more authentic, like that sounds cool. So yeah, so that's how I took the gig. It wasn't planned. I would have very happily, I guess, kept just doing principal writer stuff. But it worked out.
And help me understand the difference between the sort of principal writer role and the lore master. Like, where do they overlap and where are they different?
So it really depends on the project. Loremaster on Elder Scrolls Online was very different than Loremaster on the new project that we were doing. With ESO, like, yes, it was taking care of like franchise stuff and people coming to you and talking to you about stuff. But I was also, at the same time, I was still doing like senior principal writer stuff. Like I wasn't in charge of major releases, but I was still doing quests and stuff. So like that part of my job never changed. Like I was still, you know, doing quests and doing steely items and writing books and doing all that stuff. So it was really kind of like two jobs. Which it was kind of a lot. But it was also because it was a live product. There was all the other stuff that takes place outside of the game, all the game that you play, right? Like, so all the monetization stuff, all of the marketing stuff, all of the, you know, the kind of like side ancillary supporting material. Doing, you know, we were talking to a board game people about stuff. It was helping out with the card game they were developing. So there's all these kind of supplemental systems that required help and review and suggestions and stuff like that. So there was a lot to it. And when you're on that like live service train, like it just never stops. It's just like. So it was a lot, and it was a lot of referring to existing material because I mean Elder Scrolls is a decades old franchise, so there's a lot of research and a lot of going back and, you know, looking at stuff that we've done before. But then when I made the transition to the other project, like it was a completely different experience. Like there were no quests to write really at that stage. So that entire section of my job was just not there anymore. And there was no decades of material, right? Like is making it up whole cloth. So, so it's just very, 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 very different experiences. But both of them were interested. The primary interest was in protecting the IP and advocating for its best qualities. And so in that regard, they were the same. But in terms of day to day, it was very, very different.
Got it. And it's interesting that earlier on you mentioned, being a big fan of constraints, right? Constraints help, create the canvas that you can work in. And I can't help but feel like the role that you had was part of setting those constraints in a healthy way, right? It was a part of kind of understanding where the boundaries are, adding, extending them where you can, but also holding them true at times as well, and kind of helping to create that canvas to help people be inspired.
Yeah, at its best, I think that's true. I think that it's a tough gig because it's like I said, we're not making movies or books, we're making games, right? And games, in order to be successful games, have to do things that don't always line up one-to-one with the sort of universe that you're developing in your brain. And I mean, you and I, we worked through situations like this multiple times. Me and John as well, where you're trying to, at its best, the Loremaster is providing constraints, but also opportunities. Like say, here's a technology that I think is really cool. Are there ways that you can utilize that to make your job better and to make the thing that you produce both better and more in line with the sort of basic principles of the IP? And when that works, it's great. There's not a better feeling, because you're like complete simpatico. It's like, oh yeah, this. It's making great gameplay. It's supporting the lore in a really interesting way. And then there are varying levels of success underneath that, where it's like, somebody has a great idea and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know, that really, I'm struggling to figure out how to make that fit. And there is mostly healthy tension there, I think. But it can be frustrating for everybody. It can be frustrating for the developers who are making the stuff, because they're like, we have a great idea, we know people are going to enjoy it and that they're going to like playing it. So, let's not be a pain in the ass about this. And like, I'm completely, sympathetic to that. But then it's also, it's my job to advocate for the IP. It's like the Lorax. The IP can't speak for itself, right? You need someone there to speak for it. So it's tough. There's a lot of give and take, and a lot of it runs on trust that everyone is working in good faith and that everybody's just trying to do the right thing and get to where you want to go. And I think that my experience has always been very positive. I think that people, you're going to get frustrated now and then, but I think that people understood the value of IP principles and making a unique universe. And like I said, at its best, that unique universe can inform and enhance and provide opportunities that wouldn't be there otherwise. So yes, I think that it creates constraints, but also, yes, I think it creates opportunities that are, if you execute on them, makes it really, really cool.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that's probably also a part of modern game development. Not all games, but now there are more games that try to build that really authentic world, strong world building, strong, consistent lore, that and the best versions of those, like you're saying, manifest that lore in the mechanics, in the gameplay, in the experience.
Exactly.
And I think the role that you held, for me personally as a designer, was like a really exciting marriage of like, I'm really excited about this silly random mechanic thing, right? And you could give it purpose, or like you said, the other way around, you could come up with something that's like, hey, this could give something purpose, what can we do with it?
Right.
That's a really interesting role, and a really interesting, again, a very probably poorly understood role, right? Not many people would necessarily understand that that's a role that you could even do, and I think it's a really interesting one.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it is it's really cool because I think that relationship that you just outlined is sort of game development in microcosm, right? Like it's about taking the best aspects of what makes the game really distinct in terms from a narrative perspective or from a world building perspective, and then marrying that with the things that make the game fun to play, which honestly are like I said, I advocate for the IP, but like real talk, like gameplay is king when it comes to games because they're games, right? You play them. It's not a movie. It's not a book. So when you can get those things together, when you can get that sort of narrative, sort of more kind of I don't know what the word for it is, but when you can take that narrative and you can take the gameplay and you can fuse those things together in a compelling way, then you're going to it's going to be gold. It's going to be great.
Yeah, yeah, and such a big change from Mario and Zelda, right? Which
Right.
had the loosest of contexts, but not a whole lot of follow through in terms of world and gameplay. So, like personally, as you, Lehman, as the person, right? How much does what you do reflect who you are? Are they very similar? It's clearly there's some passions, right, that followed through in your career, but how much of your sort of game development persona is overlaps with you as Lehman the non-game developer?
That's a great question. I think that it's pretty hand in glove, to be honest, which I think is why I enjoyed my job as much as I did. Like it was a great job. It's just a great job, and I think that it does. I mean, I've always been interested in ideas and in telling stories that are authentic and that make people think. And if we do our job right, I mean, I don't want to make it. I mean, it's beep boops, but like, I really do. I really believe that the medium is capable of doing good things, genuinely good things. And when we present nuanced narratives in complex worlds and kind of tell stories about that, I mean, I think that we have the possibility to make the world a better place. So yeah, I think that, like I said, I was a huge philosophy nerd. I'm a huge history nerd. And so I think that this job was the perfect job for me because I think it mirrors my, my personal kind of interests so well.
Yeah, I love that. And then how has your role impacted you as a gamer? Has it enhanced it? Has it challenged it? How's that gone?
Yeah, and people ask me that a lot. I think that my role has influenced my life as a gamer less than just my life as a person. It's like, it's like I'm a father, and I can't sit down for a 20-hour gamer session where I can just run through the newest RPG or whatever. So like I think that has had a bigger influence. But I am more mindful of how narrative works. Like not necessarily does it work or doesn't it work, but how does it work or not work? And we're always learning, and I think that it's hard not to, with this discipline, play a game and say, oh, I really, really loved how they did that, or oh, I would have done that a little differently, and I think it would have been successful. But I don't think it's never risen to the point where it has a negative effect on my gaming. I know that's something that people will get really worried about sometimes. They're like, oh, I don't want to go into games because then I won't enjoy games anymore. And that hasn't really been the case for me. Like, I think you just have a slightly different perspective, a more academic perspective on it that it's easy to walk away from when you're playing it. It's more like after you're done, you're like, well, how do I think about that? Yeah, I honestly, nowadays, most of the time, I find myself playing games that are very narrative light, just because they're in and out in 15 minutes, right? And so like Helldivers and Fortnite, Marvel Rivals, like that's been kind of where I am recently. But every so often I'll jump in it. Like I'm super excited about Hades 2. Like I like like my son was playing Hades 1 downstairs, which is another perfect example of narrative and gameplay married together in this like really cohesive, beautiful whole. And I know that people are saying, "No, Hades 2 is even better." I'm like, "How is that possible?" So like that's a game that I know I'm gonna be spending a lot of time on. But again, the roguelite, it's sort of built for people like me because it's like, yes, it's a big game, but it's also you're in and out in 15 minutes, right? So, so still a gamer, still play pretty much every night, but the time frame, the investment is just a little bit different.
Got it. Makes sense. And then, yeah, as sort of related to that, and obviously as a parent too, like how does your family relate to what you do?
It's a very complex household when it comes to our relationship with video games because it's like games are like an incredibly important part of my life. Games are not an incredibly important part of my wife's life, and it's funny. Like she's so crazy. Like I love her to death, but like when we were in college, I was really into. I got into Tenchu Stealth Assassins: Wrath of Heaven. We're like, it's an amazing game if you haven't played it. But it's this stealth action game, and it's pretty technical and like not a game that you would like hand to someone who has no interest in games and be like, "Hey, play this." But my wife picked it up and she got like really good at it, like really good. Like she's getting like Grandmaster on every level, and I was like, "Holy shit, have I unlocked something for her? Like, have I opened her eyes to something?" And then she was like, "Okay, I'm done." And then I was like, "Wait, what do you mean? Okay, you're done. I got these other games you can play." She's like, "No, I really like that game, and that's it." And I was like, "What?" And then she like didn't play a game for like a really long time. She played a little Tony Hawk with us. She got really into The Sims for a while. But for the most part, video games are just not a huge part of her life. So it's funny, like when we try to like we just like she understands it's important to me, and she understands it's important for my relationship with my friends, and she understands it's becoming important for my kids. But it's just not. It's a sort of a purely like cerebral understanding. It's not like a visceral understanding. My son is really, really into video games. My daughter is into video games, not quite as much as he is. But it's cool to watch and to see which things they kind of get into. My daughter is really into like Astrobot and Animal Crossing, and my son is into like he's playing Hades and he plays Marvel Rivals and he got really into the Insomniac Spider-Man games and stuff like that. So it's cool to watch that evolve and to find when he finally graduated to 2 sticks, I was like, yeah, now we're there, and my daughter's getting there, and we're like, oh yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, it's funny. There's me who's like, like video games are part of our education. Go out and play video games. And then there's my wife who's like, what are we doing? Like, it's a beautiful day outside. So it's funny, but I think it's healthy. I think that I think that if it was just me, I think the kids would miss out on a lot of stuff, and if it was just her, I think that the kids would miss out on a lot of stuff. So it's a good partnership. We're able to make it work.
Yeah, I love that. And it's you mentioned earlier that your siblings maybe sort of play here and there, and what about any other members of your family that kind of relate to what you do, or inspired by what you do, or confused by what you do?
Yeah, my nephew's really into video games. My niece is pretty into video games. My nephews and nieces on my wife's side are pretty into it. But I mean, if I was like my parents and stuff like that, I think this is a pretty common thing. I mean, they just don't really have any idea what's going on. And I remember one of my favorite stories about my dad is my dad never played video games, had no interest in them whatsoever when we were growing up. And same with my mom, but he just didn't get it at all. So I remember when I was in, I think it was in college. I came home and I was like, Dad, I got this game. It's called Halo. I think you're really going to enjoy it. I don't know why I thought he was really going to enjoy it. Like I just like convinced myself that it's manifestly true that this game is good and any normal intelligent person would enjoy it, right? So I brought it home and I'm like, okay, here's the controller. He's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, okay, you just do this and you shoot. And so we're playing the game. He's got the cut it up into the four parts of the screen, and I keep looking at his part of the screen and his gun. He's like looking, and then it just keeps going up, and he's like spinning around in circles. And I'm like, all right, Dad, let me reset you or whatever. And then he's like doing it, and then it would just go back up and go around in circles again. So that was pretty. I feel like I just kind of came to terms with like this will never be a thing that he understands or really be interested in. But he's he likes that I like it. Same with my mom. But yeah, there's not really a fulsome understanding of what that's about, or certainly not how it's made. Not even like what it is, but like how it's made.
That's a great story. And of course, you would try and get your dad into a split screen couch co-op, game. It sounds like that's such a passion of yours that's the. It makes sense. That's where you kind of go and try and come on, Dad, you're gonna love this. That's a great story. Well, thanks, Lehman. I want to kind of wind this down. I loved every one of these conversations I've done. Everyone's had their own journey, obviously, but there's always that moment where you sort of see the parallels between where you started as a gamer, where you started as a developer, and here you are as a person, and the fact that yours had these strange left turns of like, I'm this kind of, oh wait no, and I'm doing, oh wait no, is right. Really cool. That's a great story, and I really enjoyed working with you. Our time together was really, I remember it very fondly, and I hope we get to work together again. But I think your role is such a unique role in the industry that it's been great to get a good understanding of how it came to be for you and how it was to be that Loremaster. So I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, man. It was a real pleasure, and yeah, the same. I think I had a really great time with you and your team working on the game and stuff, and I genuinely hope we get to do it again.
Agreed. Thank you.
Right on.